I don't want to say it, but it's too late for me. If you look into 8 years, that's 8 years of lost income. And I don't want to put it so direct, but because of course, yeah, I also gained a lot of experiences during those 8 years. But just one way of thinking of it is you're losing income every day. And I finally decided to look into Texas and also realized that they waived all of the renewal requirements in 2020, and I missed that. I got my license back, and now I'm completing my task of the move. I'm getting the boxes sorted out. Yeah, it's gonna be a big move, big long
Wow.
drive from DC to Texas
After all these years,
after all these years.
you made it. Are you a foreign trained nurse looking to move to and work as a nurse in the United States? In this episode, I'm going to be speaking with a nurse who's had a long and challenging journey from the Philippines to the United States. He went to nursing school in the Philippines, tried to get his license in California with no luck, moved to Abu Dhabi and worked there for a few years before finding his way to Canada. In Canada, he quickly lost his passion for nursing until COVID came along and a desperate need for nurses arose. This reinvigorated his passion for nursing, and he began the application process to work as a nurse in Texas after over a decade. So, with that said, let us know who you are and why you decided to become a nurse.
My name is Jay, and I graduated in nursing school back in 27. And I originally from the Philippines, and I had my foundation of nursing there. And as a Filipino, you have lots of relatives that are in nursing, especially in the US. So it's always in the back burner until I reach college or university. That's when I decided to be in the healthcare industry. And I don't want to say this, but initially I wanted to be a doctor, as many Filipinos do. So I had my pre-med or not nursing related course in university, but I saw it that it's too long for me, and I wanted to work in a hospital right away. And that's why after the first semester, I dropped out and moved into my hometown and enrolled into a nursing school. That's when it started. And back in 2012, also my family was hit with deaths that really motivated me in getting into the nursing profession, or at least in the healthcare profession. Two of my grandparents passed away with cancer back in that year. That really fueled my desire to enter nursing. And it's a long process. And finally, I'm here, and now I'm moving down to the States.
Are your parents in the healthcare field?
No, my dad was an engineer and my mom is in agriculture, but she really wanted to be a nurse during her university years. That was like 1976.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think it was already more expensive than the other courses or other professions. So that's why she were not able to go into nursing school, and she went into agriculture instead.
I see. Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I do. My brother is in IT. He's still back in the Philippines. And my sister-in-law is a doctor there.
So are you the first of your family to move to another country?
Yes, I am. At least in the first degree. But in extended family, probably fifth. My dad's aunt moved into New York as a nurse back, I don't know, I think in the 90s. So that's how also influenced me to be a nurse is, oh, there your grandma is in New York. And I've got these little treats when they visit and learn more about New York and the US. And yeah, they always invited me to move here in North America or New York when they knew that I was in nursing school. So that kept me interested for longer years.
So how long was the nursing program back in the Philippines, and at what age did you graduate?
Nursing program there is usually 4 years, 2 semesters per year. There are that can do it in 3 years, but there are 3 semesters in a year. It's not very popular that you graduate as an associate degree nurse and work right away. Most of us work through the BSN, especially also US citizens that have moved to the Philippines to get their nursing educations and move back here once it's done. And I graded when I was 20.
Oh, okay. Do you remember how much you paid for the program?
Probably, probably a lot, but in peso,
Yeah,
there wasn't a lot of education loans back home. It's usually your parents that pay for your university.
I see. So, at what point did you decide that you wanted to move to North America?
Back in 2008, the goal of most of the nurses, unfortunately, is to travel or work outside the country. We usually start in the Middle East. There are also opportunities in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, but through a study or bridging type of immigration pathway, which also will cost nurses $500,000 for tuition and cost of living expenses. So I didn't go that pathway. Having the thought of moving with my family or extended family in the US seems more interesting. And then after nursing school, I took my domestic or national nursing licensure exam to keep my knowledge refreshed or stay as fresh as it is. I applied for the NCLEX RN in California with the California Board of Nursing. And so I got my nurse or NCLEX result in 2009, but unfortunately, the California Board of Nursing requires you to have an SSN to be able to acquire a license. So that's a big hurdle for me, and especially the EB3 visa or employment-based visa for nurses or other professionals in the healthcare industry was behind for I'm not sure, but it's probably 10 years during that time. So even if I applied for a visa screen, it will expire every 2 years. It means that I need to take my IELTS or my English proficiency test every 2 years. So I just put that in the back burner. At the same time, around 2009, I went into those job or hiring events in the Philippines with a bunch of agencies hiring, or I think they're just immigration agencies that hire or get nurses. So they get paid for the immigration services to Canada. That's how I learned about I think the program before was called Federal Skilled Worker Program that has a quota of 500 nurses a year annually all over the world. And you can apply and send all your paperwork every August, I think. But when I got all my English tests and all other requirements, the program closed. This is like 2012. And 2012, so Canada is not an option. USA is still not an option. I decided to take another RN license, this time in Abu Dhabi or in UAE. So I moved there 2013. And I stayed there for a couple of years and working as a home care nurse. It's very different, but it's a good opportunity for me to have an overseas experience. And before my contract expired, I have a nurse here in Canada or in British Columbia who invited me to try it here because everything's not moving anywhere. I just said yes. I didn't even research. I thought Vancouver Island was Vancouver City. So when I got here, I was looking for snow because I arrived like December 30th. I was freezing. I was like that scene from Cool Runnings when they went out the airport in Calgary and they're freezing. That was me. But unfortunately, there's a take of immigrating to Canada. Unfortunately, you can't practice as a nurse right away. And my immigration pathway was as a live-in caregiver program. So it was tough back in the day. My base rate was $10.33.
My goodness.
And you can't work with any other employer for 3 years because that's the contract. And with that rate, I couldn't pay for my credential evaluation and preparation. Credential evaluation costs already hundreds of dollars. After that visa screen type of evaluation, you send it to the Board of Nursing in the province where you are or wanted to practice as a nurse. And that's another evaluation, probably another hundreds of dollars before. And then once you got evaluated, they send you for a third-party computer-based assessment. That's the first part. And the second part is an OSCE type simulation lab that has 5 stations and you simulate your practice as what nurses do. And it involves lots of preparations because of course, it's a different setting. You have to practice within the Canadian nursing law and also culture, also language. They're very important with communication. And unfortunately, that went on for 4 years. Of course, moving here, it's beautiful here. You get comfortable, even if you're getting paid as with the lowest rate or not even livable wage. But after I get my contract, I acquired my permanent residence. Then you get a little bit of freedom in choosing your next career or position. And I was very happy with that because I had a chance to get into positions that are more established, and also you get more pay.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's still hard to get into nursing at that point.
Mm.
So from 2015, that would be 2018 when I finished my contract and got my permanent residence. And then it kind of burned me out, to be honest, being in home care for 4 years, going 5 years, because it's very different. You don't have lots of freedom, and home care here in North America is different in Abu Dhabi or the Middle East.
How is it different?
You're like an au pair. I think it's based in the British healthcare system that palliative clients get in-house or live-in nurses with clients that are not even far away. Doesn't matter if they live in the city or remote, they get nurses living with them 24/7. And respite, you're not sure if you're gonna get it. Your living conditions are not checked by the government. So you just need to do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
And so I look into other jobs that is outside the healthcare industry, even from dishwasher to
Wow.
Tim Hortons, a washer at the car lot to get by. But I noticed that the passion still is not there. So luckily I got into positions that are still related in healthcare, being in a pharmacy as a pharmacy tech or in home care. But this time I work in a cubicle, more comfortable. I do the staffing, customer service relations, and until my last position, which is home support supervisor. That gave me lots of opportunity or occasion that I can still use my nursing skills and knowledge into my role. And those positions kept my passions in check.
It sounds like you've been through quite a journey from 2008 to 2018, and you went to Abu Dhabi to practice as a nurse there because you had such a hard time getting to Canada and getting into the US. How was it working in Abu Dhabi? How was the pay? How was your work schedule? What was your life like in Abu Dhabi?
Work is okay, but it's different, completely different. Back home, you're a little bit used to the Western culture, and you go there, hit the ground running without language preparation, culture preparation. And so it's lots of surprise from getting to know how to move or how to speak, how to present yourself, that you won't offend the local culture or the family that you're living with. And also, I need to learn some of Arabic that I can go by simple stuff like open or close or sit down, get up. But aside from those cons, you have lots of pros. Your pay is somewhat okay, comparable to what you get in the Philippines. I would say that would be, say, times 10.
Okay.
Because I was getting paid about 8,000 dirhams and divided by 2.2, that would be Canadian.
So 8,000 divided by 2.2, so around what, 4,000?
Yeah, right, about 4,000 a month.
4,000, yeah.
But the hours are heavy because you're with the client 24/7, and your nurse manager doesn't even know if you're there for 1 week or 37 days. You're in the middle of the desert. You only pack what you have, your scrubs, your food, your toiletries, your beddings, linen. If you're lucky, you can get a pair of dumbbells so you can exercise. If your patient is sleeping or after bedtime care, then you can do your stuff, your personal stuff. You can go out for a walk, for a run. And living situations are not that regulated because real estate in Abu Dhabi or Dubai is very expensive. So what nurses do, they rent a villa, and that's villa divided into different rooms. So I remember going there and getting into that type of villa or a room, and there's 4 bunk beds and there's 8 guys living in a room. Small kitchen, 1 washroom. It's a lot of fun.
Oh man, how much were you paying for your rent?
For rent, let's see, I think it's about 1,000 dirhams.
I see. And do you remember how much the cost was to move from the Philippines to Abu Dhabi?
Not a lot, but if you go through an agency, then they have those rates that they will just stab you when you're about to sign the contract. Oh, this is 100,000 pesos.
Oh,
Then you can't do anything but sign the contract. But in any other immigration or immigration pathway, wherever, it should be the employer who handles all the immigration costs and
yes.
transportation costs, and also sometimes living expenses from the country of origin to the destination. Ideally, it should be just my licensure expenses, which is a couple of $100. But
Mm.
all of those fees from the agency, unfortunately, you have to pay. Also, unfortunately, because the language is different, you can't go through a direct employer and talk to them.
And what kind of documents were they requesting from you, school wise and education wise?
Good question. I think school wise would be the transcript of records, including your learning experiences. That includes your clinical hours. Also, I think high school diplomas are still required, and there's no language proficiency in Arabic required, and your local RN license and it's back then it was called Health Authority Abu Dhabi RN license. And all of them goes through, I think it's the Department of Foreign Affairs. They need to get that evaluated and certified, and you bring all of those in a staple with a red ribbon. And unfortunately, that's another expense you have to shoulder. And get the agency forward that to their counterpart in Abu Dhabi, and the agency in Abu Dhabi handles all those visa requirements, immigration tasks that they need to complete.
Would you say the goal for most of the nurses from the Philippines and other countries that ended up in Abu Dhabi was to ultimately get to the United States, the UK, or another Western country?
That is correct. And that's unfortunate. I think back in 2003, when I entered nursing school, we are one of the biggest number of students that went into nursing school. Before us, there would be 6 blocks or 6 groups of nurses in a year. During my year, it was 12 or 14.
Man.
And looking back, you can see all of your schoolmates before they are not in the nursing profession right now. Maybe some of them are also motivated by their relatives who are in the US or in other parts of the world. And personally, I met them. Some of my classmates also moved back to the US once they got their nursing education. And unfortunately, for those who don't have lots of resources, they move into other professions available at that time. And since there's an oversupply of nurses in the Philippines, the hospitals have more control of who can hire, what do they require, their salary. Nurses even have to pay for internship, 6-month internship. You're not sure if that healthcare organization or that government hospital will hire you after. And also at that time, nurses were working for free, without any even insurance. If you get injured at work or your commute because you're just basically a new grad and you're still living with your parents, and your parents probably support you through that internship. And so with that situation, lots of nurses can't get a nursing position in the Philippines because they don't have any experience in the Philippines. And those are who are lucky and are able to go into a nursing position or get a nursing position in the Philippines can go apply overseas right away. So they're probably age 22 when they move to the Middle East. And for those who are also lucky, I think some hospitals, especially in Saudi, wouldn't require any 2 years of experience, maybe just 6 months. And you can also include that free 6 months that you work as an intern, and that would work. So even if you get a nursing experience in Abu Dhabi or in the Middle East, you couldn't go back and work as a nurse back home because there's no positions available during that time, at least. With the residence requirements in the Middle East, it's very different. It's hard to settle. You can't get your residence, you can't own a property unless you're married into a citizen, which requires you to change your religion. So that's one way. But otherwise, it's so hard to get a residence there. I know Abu Dhabi gives out like golden type of residence, but only to say businessmen or long-term nurse residents there. I've heard that too, but back in 2012, that wasn't the case.
Did you know any nurses who were earning a decent wage, like, or high income over there in Abu Dhabi?
Oh yeah, when I finished my contract in the home care, lots of us in my initial target or goal was to get into those big hospitals. They are usually managed by American healthcare organizations, say Cleveland, but they are state owned. So they would pay well. I'm not sure, probably between 12,000 to 20,000 dirhams. Also, if you hold a Western passport, you'll get paid double than compared if you're holding a Southeast Asian passport. So there are also Filipinos that are resident or have become citizens in, for example, Australia, and you can get double the pay. And also another opportunity for nurses there is oil rig or offshore nursing. So you get into the rigs for a month and you're off for another month. And that pays a lot of money. They even pay for your days off and flights to the Philippines. So you're just moving or living in the Philippines, but you're still at the same time you're working in Abu Dhabi.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so now let's go back to yeah, because this is like, I love listening to nurses who've worked in other countries. This is just really interesting to me. But at what point do you just get fed up and say, I want to move to North America, and I'm not happy here in Abu Dhabi anymore, so I need to move? At what point did you make that decision, and what was it that caused you to make that decision?
Yeah, great question. It was a long process for me, but of course, we'll go into how I decided to move from Canada to the US. And also, as I've mentioned before, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to be a permanent resident in the Middle East, for example, Abu Dhabi. And after the contract there, it's either you decide to get into a hospital while waiting for your immigration, or what do you call that? It's called a priority date. So if you applied to the US or the UK, you couldn't go out right away or move right away. So you need to wait for your visa. When will it processed? But fortunately, back in around 2015, 2016, it started to pick up again. But in 2014, when I was invited to move to Canada, I just couldn't wait anymore and I know there's pros and cons of moving to Canada and not practice as a nurse, or wait in the Middle East, work as a nurse in the hospital, and wait it out until your visa gets approved and you're eventually legally able to move into the US. So those are the two things that happened to me. But unfortunately, due to unfortunate personal reasons, I went to a very bad breakup.
Man. I know the feeling.
Yeah, and my ex was still in the same area, so I just couldn't stay there anymore. And then, I moved to Canada, and I understand it was very hard to get your nursing license here, but I'm a proud Canadian now, and I'm a returning RN after 8 years of hiatus. First 3 years was just figuring it out into my new place where I moved, which is close to Vancouver. I'm in Victoria right now. And with the current rate that I was receiving before as a new immigrant or a caregiver, is very low for me to make ends meet, or also set some aside to pay for the evaluation. And that went on for a couple of years. Eventually, when my contract expired and I'm able to get my residence, I had more freedom to work with better positions and better salary, that I was able to save up a little bit. But at the same time, there's lots of projects that pops up anytime. And what really motivated me to go back into nursing was the pandemic, 2020. Although I started my inquiries with the nursing evaluation company, also the Board of Nursing here in British Columbia and other parts of Canada. But there wasn't just any push from anyone to fast track nurses that are not educated in Canada to get their nursing licenses. So instead of those retired nurses or nursing students or nurses in the armed forces were called up to renew their licenses and work for the hospital during the pandemic. And it was heartbreaking to see everyone getting burnt out. And in 2021, I was able to see a little bit of movement with my paperwork. And at the same time, I started to look into getting my nursing license in Texas again renewed. I probably didn't mention it before, but since not getting an SS number in California, where I took my nursing examination, which is the NCLEX, I decided to get a nursing license in Texas in 2012. But unfortunately, I still couldn't move to the US because of the backlog in the visas for healthcare professionals during that year or that period. So it expired 2014 when I was already wanting to move to Canada. I didn't renew it because I thought it was just long gone. You're not sure when the visas will get approved. And I thought I'd just renew it. But then to 2021, I see most of my roommates in Abu Dhabi, those 8 guys in 4 bunk beds, are starting to arrive in the US. So we're scattered in the US. One buddy's in San Diego. One buddy just arrived in Cincinnati. One's in Houston. One's in Tallahassee. One's in Georgia. So it's just me and then one guy who are still outside the US. So aside from, it's just a funny way of looking at it. But of course, I still have the passion into nursing, and I couldn't get the opportunity to work on that here in Canada, unfortunately. And I'm happy that my fellow Canadian RNs are very supportive when they realize that I'm a nurse back home, and they wanted to encourage me to just work on getting your license, and things are moving. They almost want to pull me into the infusion room and stick the patient because they need help.
Yeah. Wow.
And those are funny, and lots of instances opportunities that enable me to display my communication skills with clients, or multitasking, or language skills, especially in English, which I feel very important, because even though I'm not growing professionally for those 8 years, at least I grew personally. And also I consider this 8 years as my early retirement, because I'm going to be working my ass off until 60 or past 60. But of course, I'm watching Nurse to Riches, so
Oh, you're funny.
Yeah.
So your nursing license to California lapsed. It expired, right?
They didn't even give me a license because
they didn't give it to you because you didn't have a social security number, right? Okay. So you were then in Canada, and you still had, at this point when the pandemic hit, you had this passion to help your fellow nurses, and you wanted to go back into it, but you kept meeting these obstacles along the way. And then you decided, okay, maybe I can try Texas, right?
Correct.
What was the process from the moment you decided, maybe I can try Texas? First, why Texas? And then secondly, what documentation was required for you to get your license in Texas?
Yeah, great question. I think I actually started the nursing requirements, course preparations here in Canada, language requirements, just to satisfy the board. But unfortunately, it's still slow. I got my report it's like the visa screen if you're there in the US. It's called NNAS back here in Canada. Took a couple of years for me to get all those requirements done and have the report, because the more you have licenses in other jurisdictions, the longer it will take for them to check all those or validate all those requirements and all of those licenses. And with the preparations required, like the OSCEs and the computer-based assessments that I mentioned earlier, those are one of the hurdles, and the process is a little bit slow. You wait a couple of months to get registered with the board, registered and get your date for the exams, because it's 2 days. And then you wait for a couple of months again to get the report. Then a couple of months again before the Board of Nursing tells you that you need 3 semesters and 300 hours to be eligible to get licensed as an RN in British Columbia. At least other parts of the provinces, I think they're doing better. And things are moving, fortunately. There's just news that come out that those hurdles might get eradicated or taken off effective summer of 2024. But unfortunately, I don't want to say it, but it's too late for me. If you look into 8 years, that's 8 years of lost income. And I don't want to put it so direct, but because of course I also gained a lot of experiences during those 8 years. But just one way of thinking of it is you're losing income every day. And I finally decided to look into Texas, and also realized that they waived all of the renewal requirements in 2020, and I missed that. And I missed that.
Wow.
And I checked all of the requirements with the Board of Nursing, or check the website, create an account, give you all the lists of the requirements for licensure or renewal if Canadian nurses out there have already licenses here in the US. And since my nursing license lapsed in 2014, that means it's more than 4 years. I was required to take a refresher program, which worked for me really well, because for being out the practice for 8 years kind of hit my confidence in if I'm going to be safe or efficient as a nurse. And of course, changes in technology, techniques, and personally just fear of failure. So those are the things that I need to overcome.
So there are nurses out there who they've passed their NCLEX long ago, but they haven't been able to find a job. Or maybe they haven't passed their NCLEX. They finished nursing school, and this was a long time ago. And now they want to get back into it, and they want to study for the NCLEX. They passed their NCLEX, but they have never worked as nurses. This refresher course, what does it consist of?
Great question. I wanted to share that it's very motivating how many nurses you meet during those refresher programs. There are nurses that have been away for 20 years. Some of them are doing a business career or finance industry career. Some of them are just raising their own families. And I met nurses that are in their 40s, 50s, are coming back, wanted to get back into the clinical area and use their knowledge and skills again. And also nurses that are still in overseas or outside the US, that same as me, has let their Texas or other state license expired, and they are required to take that refresher program. So usually a refresher program is at least 6 months worth of classes. And the good thing about it is you can take it at your own pace, because I think those educators, or at least the Board of Nursing, understands that you might be in a different career or you're raising a family. And the main parts of it is 5 didactic classes, which includes pharmacology, documentation, IV therapy, nursing jurisprudence, and physical assessments. I think those are, at least in Texas, core parts of the nursing education or career that you need to get refreshed at. You wouldn't know how nervous I am getting asked to compute this dose during my live online. You have your classmates there. Your teacher, and then I only knew bed making for the last 8 years.
Well, it's also nerve-wracking because you really want to work, right?
I really want to work. Yeah.
And this is what it takes in order for you to get there. And if you can't pass it, you won't be able to work. So there's a lot on the line.
A lot of the line.
Did you take this in Texas or did you take this in Canada?
I took it in Canada because luckily 2021, I started looking into it, the COVID restrictions in travel and also classroom or building requirements are still in place. So if it wasn't COVID, it would be a tough time for me to get my nursing license back or get it reactivated, because that means, yes, I need to move to Texas to take it there. That includes lots of expenses moving, renting a temporary place, a car, but all of those are waived since it's COVID. So we're required to get your online classes, which is about 4 hours each, if I remember it correctly. And we were doing 80 hours with patient simulations with Shadow Health. That was the program that I was using. But 2022, I was still working full time. Since the pandemic, I was working Monday to Friday in my staffing job at the home care company. And when the pandemic hit the next month, I started working in the pharmacy Saturdays and Sundays. So I was essentially working 7 days a week for over a year.
Wow.
And I can't schedule the online classes Texas time because they're 2 hours ahead. It's too early. Or I don't even have a days off. So I asked for my bosses to cut down my hours. I started with just working 4 days a week, but then it's still hard because unfortunately you take some of the job back home with staffing and scheduling, paperwork. And also it went from April 2022 when I started my online course to say September. I wasn't really moving with the 80-hour simulation labs. I asked for my hours to get more. So I was working 2 hours a week, 2 days a week.
Oh, okay.
So I can have more time with, reading, preparing before my simulations. Because it's also nerve-wracking for me. And I wanted to be doing it the best as I can during the first time. Although you have a couple of tries before you submit it to your preceptor. So it didn't work out. And then June this year, the COVID restrictions in Texas was canceled. So now I was required to go to Texas and complete my 80 hours of clinical placement. So I went there August 30th and got a placement at the West Houston Medical Center. I got 80 hours worth of experience in the medical surgical floor and ED. And I completed September 17th. I got my license back, and now I'm completing my task of the move and getting the boxes sorted out. Yeah, it's gonna be a big move, long drive from DC to Texas.
After all these years.
After all these years, I graduated 2007 too.
Wow. Okay. Now you're in Texas, right? But why not, New York? Why not Florida? Why not Chicago? Why not another state? Why Texas?
And that is because of Nurses to Riches and your help. I was able to decide or narrow down where to move. In 2002, my girlfriend and I went for a drive along the West Coast, also to meet a buddy of mine who is in San Diego right now. And at the same time, so I can scout or decide where to move, whether Washington, Oregon, or California. I'm not really keen into California and Oregon at that time. The main goal back in 2002 is to get my Texas nursing license back and endorse it to Washington. And I can get a nursing position in Port Angeles, which is just half an hour away by ferry to my hometown here in Victoria. So that would make it easier for me and my girlfriend, because at that time she wanted to keep her job here. And that was the goal at first. And I did some of the research, say 2020 to 2021. My source was the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yes. And I got this.
There you go. Yep. That's it. Yeah. That's what I use all the time.
Yeah. And I was looking into which state to go with all the factors that I need to consider, the cost, the tax. I didn't use the real estate prices though at that time. Work safety and also crime rates was very big for me during my research in 2021. And so all of those states that have X's
Hmm.
are not were not an option for me. And the states that I was able to narrow down were Washington, Oregon, and a bunch of those Atlantic states. Although I put an X on Texas, I still considered it as my number five options, only because of I'm not sure. I don't want to offend anyone, but I think I just watch lots of news and I see crime or gun violence. That's why that I put it in the my last option. And I know I like barbecue and I, I like guns working as a kid, you play with wooden gun toys, but my girlfriend is not so happy about it. So we kind of meet in the middle, and Washington was the best because if you consider it, your annual salary is more than Texas from
Hmm.
91K to 77K. That's
Yeah.
a big difference.
Hmm.
But at the same time, the houses in Washington are far more expensive,
Yeah.
and also with the social situations, we also see it here in Vancouver. And why Texas? Even though we wanted Washington or in the Seattle area, I just want to work right away
Hmm.
because that means if I get my license and then take another step of endorsing my license in Washington, I'm not sure how long the process is. Even if it's 2 weeks, I just want to work right away.
Okay, so if someone were to ask you, a Canadian citizen were to ask you, okay, give me a step by step from however many steps it takes to
Mhm.
become an RN in Canada and transfer that license to Texas so that you can then work as an RN in Texas. What steps did you have to take? I'm talking about documentation wise, any courses like you mentioned, you had to take the refresher course. Tell me, and then also like the application process, where did you apply through? Give me a step by step.
Yeah, amazing. Luckily for Canadians and Mexican nurses, they are very lucky. The steps would be easier and shorter for them because of the trade NAFTA visa or the TN visa. But first and foremost, before they decide to work in the US and consider or narrow down which state or city they wanted to live or relocate, is to check your lists of cities
Yeah.
and comparing the cost of living to tax laws,
Hmm.
to safety indexes, weather, climate,
Yeah.
lots of those stuff should be considered, especially if they have family, kids. Search into the neighborhoods, schools. Also, they should, and first step would be contacting the board of nursing that where they wanted to practice. And if you make an account, they will just give you all the requirements of how to register, and mostly they have different requirements, but not a lot. For example, if my fellow Canadian nurses wanted to move into Texas and they only have the Canadian nursing license, they don't have an NCLEX yet.
Hmm.
They create an account with the Board of Nursing, satisfy their verification requirements. They might have some paperwork needed to be done, completed, and be sent out to their board of nursing in Canada, and then that should go back directly to the board of nursing here in the US. And at the same time, they are Canadian and Mexican nurses wouldn't be required to take an English proficiency exam if by birth or if their medium of education is delivered in English. And so that's one step off. Next step would be if you need to register for the NCLEX RN. I'm not sure if the NCLEX RN in Canada would be comparable to the NCLEX RN in the US, but that would depend on your board of nursing. And the next step, and very important step, is to apply for your visa screen. Um, Visa screen is what in Canada NNAS in Canada is. So essentially, it's a service where a third party does all the credential evaluation for all of your education, nursing related education, and all of the nursing license and registrations that you are holding current and have held in the past in all jurisdictions around the world. Make sure that they are legitimate. But of course, with my fellow Canadians, it would be easier because, for example, you only have your provincial license, and that would make the process shorter and quicker. And another step is to take your American Heart Association certified basic life support, advanced cardiac life support, and if you'd like to work in PEDS, then you take PALS. I haven't checked if there are educators that provide AHA approved courses here in Canada, because when I took my BLS to satisfy my temporary permit in the refresher program in Texas, I took the Canadian BLS. It's Canadian Red Cross BLS. It looks like they approve it, but for work, check with the hospitals, I think. And once you have all of those, feel free to send out applications online, usually through job websites. And if you already research which are the best hospitals or healthcare organizations in the city that you like to move, feel free to contact them directly, because applying into those job banks will sometimes just direct you to the company website anyway. So create an account with a healthcare organization, send out applications, and attend the interviews online. And if you have time and if you really like to experience the neighborhood, the city,
Yes.
just fly like what I did. I flew to Houston for over a month just to experience, the healthcare setting, the culture, the people, driving, and the neighborhood, demographics, real estate, a lot of stuff. And demographic is also very important because you might need Spanish into your work, especially if you're an ER. It helps a lot with your assessment. And with moving into, say, how to get a nursing job in the US, that'll be also through online job banks. Once you get all those requirements, most of the if you click on the nursing position that you choose, there's lots of screening questions. They will ask if you have a valid state RN license, and if you have a valid AHA approved BLS, CPR, ACLS, and if you need a visa sponsorship now or in the future. It means if you need sponsorship with your TN visa, or even if you're Canadian and you wanted to be residing in the US long term, or if you want to move here permanently, then you would need to acquire an EB3 visa, which is a third degree specifically for nurses and healthcare professionals. That is an employment-based visa. But the thing is, now the current date for the EB3 is May 1st, 2020. So if you apply now, that wouldn't be processed right away until the date is adjusted to the current date. But that's just EB3. Canadians and Canadian nurses, or maybe LPNs as well, can have a valid visa through Trade NAFTA. The only thing that they need is a job offer, a proof of Canadian education or Canadian license. And also, when their visa screen report has come back, they would need that 2% in any border crossing of around Canada and the US. And they would just need to ask to be given a Trade NAFTA visa right there. So my only suggestion is to travel within the office hours or when you cross the border. It'll be easier for you. And I think like nurses here in Canada would have a great time like attending those interviews and hiring events because it's just a lot. When I was in Houston, I probably attended 3 or 4 hiring events and also interviews. And I didn't have my AHA certifications and my citizenship back then, and I'm getting responses. So I think, yeah. And now that for Canadian nurses, and now that I have my AHA approved certifications and my citizenships, it means that you wouldn't get screened out of the pool right away. And if you consider to be a resident in the U.S., there's also another way, is to get an EB3 visa. It means that you find an employer who is willing to petition you and complete an I-140 form and send it to USCIS. At the same time, you can concurrently fill that form and send it out to the USCIS and wait until you get a priority date. And with that is once you get your priority date, it means you can apply for your change of status or application to be a resident. The only thing is you need to be present in the US or have relocated in the US, I think. Because once you apply with that I-485 or petition to adjust your status and it's the current date, it means you can also apply for the I-765, which is an employment authorization document. Essentially, it's just a temporary work permit and makes your status to legally work in the U.S. The employers would be looking into that right away. It means you can work at a hospital legally without waiting for your green card or your resident visa to arrive. And I think those are the 2 ways that I can see that Canadians can find and seek a nursing position here in the US. But definitely the faster is the TN visa. It's either you are Canadian-born nurse and you have your nursing education in Canada or anywhere in the West, I think. That makes it easier. And also, I'm sure there are Canadians right now who have nursing licensure in the U.S. and they could be educated outside of Canada, couldn't get a nursing license here, and this is also an option for them to get a current nursing experience. In the long run, it will also help them get their application for Canadian RN license be more powerful. Because if you are in Canada and you're not able to practice for lots of years now, it also affects your eligibility to get a Canadian RN license. So this will be very helpful to fellow Canadians who have their nursing education outside Canada and still working on getting their Canadian RN license. And working in the U.S. is a great opportunity for whether economy or you just want to get an adventure here or career advancement, or even if you want to reunify with your friends or family. It's depending on your reason. It's a great opportunity to move here. And another thing I think I need to mention is those Canadian nurses that are not able to get their nursing license here could not get their master's as well, because of course you can't get into nursing master's school if you don't get your RN license. So if those nurses have the goal of having an advanced degree, I think it's a time to move to the US, get your master's. Like my ultimate goal is to be an NP, trauma or ED.
Wow.
Or probably nurse anesthetist. I just figured out how difficult that was. Yeah. I need to not work for a couple of years. So
yeah. So just a few questions. When you looked at applying for Texas, did you consider the fact that they don't require a social security number? Because it was so difficult to get your California license to begin with because they required a social security number. But are there states that you saw, okay, these states don't require a social security number? And then you also looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics to find out which one would make the most sense financially. So were
Right.
those some of the factors you looked at when you applied to Texas?
Yes, definitely.
Mm.
I think even before taking the NCLEX exam, lots of my colleagues back home were choosing, I think, Maryland and New York states because they can get their license right away. But I'm not sure why I chose California. I'm not sure. uh, I don't know what I was thinking, but I should have chose Maryland or New York.
Yeah. So, what did you have to take the GCFNS or the CGFNS in order to get to Texas?
CGFNS is a requirement for your visa screen.
I
So
see.
if you take your NCLEX, that you already satisfied your requirement for your
Oh,
visa screen.
I see.
But
I,
yeah, so if our fellow Canadians have the NCLEX RN, they wouldn't be required to take the CGFNS
oh,
licensure.
mm,
Yeah.
cool. And did they offer any relocation bonus or reimbursement when you accepted the offer from Canada to Texas?
All right. That great question. To that allow me to remember.
Mm.
Back in 2002, I was looking into those agencies, not necessarily travel agencies, but higher nursing. I think it's more an immigration part,
Hmm.
but they all have those contracts that would hold you for 3 years,
Yeah.
and some of them are kind of pool nurses that they would rotate you at any of their clients of any hospitals. Those kind of contracts or pathway for our Canadians is to look into those agencies if they're willing to be held into three contracts, or their rates are significantly reduced, but they won't have to do anything because the lawyers and the advisors from those companies will take care of everything. Your
Um,
your what steps you need to do, your English test, things like that, and you can at the same time you don't have to quit your full-time job here in
mm,
Canada, and you can focus on your day-to-day activities, and that agency will do the rest for you. But if you want to do it yourself, then you have more freedom into looking into more opportunities that pays your relocation,
I
and at
see.
the same time have probably a lower or a shorter contract. Those agencies also can go overboard. They can also pay for your temporary housing, your mobile phone, things like that,
Mm.
your uniform, but you could have significant cuts on your hourly rate.
So, how much was the hourly rate that they offered you at this hospital in Texas?
In this hospital. I was shocked.
Really?
Okay, can I blur it out?
Oh, you don't want to talk about it?
Oh, no, I can. Yeah, I wanted to share, but
Oh,
right
you
now,
mean that part where you said it was so low?
no,
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
actually high. It's actually
it's
high.
high.
Yeah,
Okay, I need
it's
to
actually
know.
high, and I'm surprised. But I applied for lots of big and reputable healthcare organizations that are known around the U.S.,
Mhm.
and a lot of them would require me or would screen me out because I needed visa sponsorship at that time
Mm.
when I did their interviews. And also when they say that I'm a returning RN and I haven't practiced in 8 years, they would require me to go into a paid internship,
Yeah.
but it would affect your resume and also your chance of getting a significant pay hike when you decide to transfer into another facility. And I wanted to do that because it would work on my confidence,
Mm.
and you've got lots of support with the nurses that are experienced in that specific area. And I wanted to do ED, and I tried different areas as well, say cancer units, home care, and luckily I got an offer for a neuro peds position,
Mm.
neuro slash rehab,
Mhm.
and they're very generous, and they considered my past experiences, past clinical experience, and current
Oh,
leadership experience.
really? Mm.
and they offered me 46.96.
Wow. That's pretty good for Texas.
Yeah,
That is pretty good.
46.96 plus night differential plus demographic pay because I'd be working downtown.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing, dude. When I was in New York, that's what I was making.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, I was surprised because I know new nurses that have just moved in the US
Mhm.
probably get lower offers,
Mhm.
especially if they don't have the current experience required.
Yeah. I
But
mean, there's nurses in Florida that are making $20 and $25 an hour,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, I looked into Florida as well when I was researching, and
Yeah.
that was crazy. And
Yeah.
especially the pandemic,
Yes.
that might be tough.
Yeah. So, what was your experience like traveling to the United States from Canada?
So it's,
Was it not what you envisioned? Was it completely different than what you envisioned?
uh, I think everything's the same
Mm.
because I felt like when I moved to Abu Dhabi like years back, and you just see the news that everyone's saying, oh, la, 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 la. And there's bombs exploding, and then
Yeah.
you have a different impression. Then you move into an Arabic family, and then they're eating at the same time with their family, and they're teaching their kids with their homework. Everyone's the same. And
Yeah.
that's what I saw in when I went into Houston, and not like that. Not only that, I mean, Houston looks like Abu Dhabi,
Oh. Oh.
like the big highways,
Yeah.
and it's also warm. I went there; it was
Yeah.
like 43. I'm not sure. I'm still working on the Celsius and Fahrenheit right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So it's warm and dry, and there's no what do you call it? There's no planning. So residential stuff could be next to a commercial stuff, and like tall buildings
Yeah. Yeah.
beside each side of this highway, and you meet the people, and some of the customs are the same in the Philippines. Say you address your coworker or another person as with sir and ma'am, then falls by their first name.
Yeah.
It's the same, especially in the workplace. That's and the people are nice. You can you can certainly experience what do you call it? It's a southern
Like camaraderie,
hospitality.
hospitality. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You would know that you're new. And one thing that I do when moving to another place, even in Abu Dhabi or in Canada, because essentially I didn't know anyone
Hmm.
when I moved, is I joined a gym right away. It's either a weightlifting gym or
Hmm.
I'm into jiu-jitsu, grappling, Muay Thai stuff.
Yeah.
So it's easier to meet the locals,
Mm.
especially here, and you learn the culture right away. It's not like back home you can pop up to your neighbor's house without without no
Yeah.
without a heads up. And
Yeah.
here I learned that the hard way.
That's awesome.
And also you'll get used to the language right away because native speakers have different way of have different expressions or different way of building their sentences, and
Mhm.
that transfers to your workspace as well
Mm.
because it's if there's a single miscommunication, that's a big trouble.
That's true. Yeah. So, if you could speak to your former self, the Filipino student that just graduated from nursing school who ultimately wanted to come to the US, what would you tell your former self to do so that you can get to the US faster?
That's a tough one. I think what I would do or tell my 20-year-old self is to just research, use your resources, just ask questions to either relatives or people or professional groups that are already in the US or in groups or even a mentor like yourself because that will go a long way. Anything could happen or any projects or doors or windows could close, but at least you still have that guide with you. And I think that's the way that you succeed and would not get lost in this journey.
Mhm.
And like everyone, I'm just amazed and happy that lots of nurses that I watch in your show are doing great things, and keeps me motivated because at now I'm before pushing 40. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just launching my nursing career again,
Wow. Yeah.
and that's a big help having this lots of support either from YouTube, other apps, online gives you a big lift. You know,
You know,
anything could happen for a reason.
I can tell that you're pretty excited about this whole thing and you probably can't wait. I can tell.
Yeah.
But what I would love to do is maybe like, I don't know, 6 months to a year after you move to Texas and you work, I want to know what your experience is like. So I would love to have you back on the show and find out how you feel about working as a nurse in the
Oh,
United States.
definitely. Yeah,
Right?
that would be
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, then make sure you click on this playlist here and follow us for more.